He looks calm, organized, sharp, in control. You'd never guess the war happening inside his mind. Because when Mars enters Virgo, perfection becomes a shield. Every detail becomes a distraction from the pain he doesn't know how to name. He fixes everything, except himself. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much. And hiding behind precision is safer than being seen in his mess. In this video, you'll uncover the truth behind his silence, his structure, and his struggle, and why this transit is awakening what he's tried so hard to contain. Why the masculine feels driven to perfect rather than express. He doesn't show the storm. He shows the strategy. He doesn't admit he's drowning. He builds a better boat, tightens the sails, smiles like everything is fine. Because somewhere along the way, maybe as a child, maybe through heartbreak, maybe through years of emotional dismissal, he learned that being vulnerable made him less of a man. That softness made him weak. That emotion made him unreliable. That pain was shameful. And so, he learned to perform instead of process. When the emotions got loud, he got busy. When the pressure got heavy, he got productive. When the pain got close, he got precise. And now, especially as Mars moves into Virgo, this pressure intensifies. This transit doesn't just bring energy, it brings expectation, a drive to optimize, to fix, to correct. But that drive isn't random. It's a cover, a container, a coping mechanism. Because perfection feels safer than presence. Control feels safer than chaos. Silence feels safer than exposing what he can't even name. He edits himself before anyone else can criticize. He scans every room for what could go wrong. He analyzes conversations days after they end, wondering if he could have said it better. Not because he's neurotic, but because he's trying to earn safety through being perfect enough not to be rejected. The masculine, especially under Virgo's microscope, isn't just aiming for excellence. He's reaching for protection. He's begging in his own quiet way, if I just get it right, maybe I'll finally be loved for it. But perfection was never the path to love. Expression is. And until he feels safe to express, he'll keep tightening his grip on the very things that are keeping him stuck. This is why the masculine so often chooses perfection over presence, performance over emotion, action over vulnerability. Not because he doesn't want to feel, but because he was never taught how to feel and be held in it. This Mars in Virgo transit is peeling back those layers. It's not just revealing where he tries to fix everything, it's asking why. And that question, if he's brave enough to sit with it, may be the beginning of his freedom. How overanalyzing becomes a coping mechanism. He doesn't just think, he spirals, replaying every word, every moment, every expression. Not because he wants to obsess, but because it's the only way he's ever felt in control of chaos. When life feels unpredictable, when emotions run deep and fast and raw, he doesn't lean into feeling. He retreats into logic. Because logic doesn't break your heart. Logic doesn't abandon you. Logic doesn't shame you for being too much. So he builds mental maps for emotions he's afraid to feel. He tries to solve what can only be held. Instead of asking, "What do I feel?" he asks, "What did I do wrong?" Instead of sitting in silence, he fills the space with questions he can't answer. It's not that he doesn't feel deeply. It's that he feels so deeply, he's afraid the depth might consume him. So he turns it all into data. If he can name it, maybe he can fix it. If he can fix it, maybe he won't have to feel the ache underneath. And Mars in Virgo only sharpens this tendency. This transit floods the masculine with a desperate urge to understand, to organize, to correct. But what's really happening is this. He's trying to think his way out of a feeling because somewhere along the way, feeling became dangerous. So he scans for patterns. He questions intentions. He plays back conversations like a detective on a crime scene. Not to hurt anyone, but because he's looking for the place where he lost control, where he got it wrong, where he failed to be enough. Overanalyzing becomes armor, an attempt to protect a heart that's never felt safe unguarded. But that armor is heavy. It keeps love out just as much as it keeps fear in. Eventually, the mind exhausts itself. because emotions can't be solved like puzzles. They can only be witnessed, felt, and released. This is the medicine of this moment. To realize that clarity doesn't always come from understanding. Sometimes it comes from surrender, from being still long enough to let the ache rise and not run from it. The hidden anxiety behind his need to control. He looks like he has it all together. He's composed, precise, calculated. You might even admire how responsible he seems, how he always knows what needs to be done. But what you don't see is how tightly he's holding it all. How every plan he makes is a lifeline. How every detail he micromanages is his way of saying, I'm not okay, but I can't afford to fall apart. Because underneath all that structure isn't confidence, it's fear. A fear so deeply woven into his nervous system, he doesn't even call it fear anymore. He calls it normal. From an early age, he may have been taught, directly or indirectly, that vulnerability was dangerous, that emotions were messy, that softness meant weakness, and in those formative years, he made a vow he never spoke aloud. I'll never be caught off guard again. I'll never need anyone. I'll be the one in control. And that vow became a personality. It became his protection. It became the reason he works late, double-checks everything, and never shows you the chaos inside. Because if he just stays ahead of it all, the pain can't catch up, the failure won't come, the abandonment won't happen. Mars in Virgo doesn't make this easier. It amplifies the need to get it just right, to clean up the mess before it's even made, to anticipate, predict, perfect. But this is not about excellence, it's about survival. Every time he over-prepares, what he's really doing is bracing for impact. He's scanning the future for anything that might hurt him, and he's convinced that if he's just good enough, smart enough, fast enough, maybe he'll finally feel safe. Maybe then he'll finally be enough. But the real wound is this. He doesn't trust that he can be loved without performing. He doesn't believe that he can be accepted in his messiness. He fears that if he lets go for even 1 second, everything, including the love he so desperately craves, will vanish. So he clutches harder, plans deeper, controls more tightly, and all the while his soul is gasping for air, begging for rest, begging for someone to say, you don't have to be perfect for me to stay. You don't have to control everything to be loved. You can fall apart, and I'll still hold you. Because real peace, true peace, doesn't come from controlling every outcome. It comes from learning that he can survive even when he doesn't. And that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't have to be the one holding everything anymore. What his precision and planning are really protecting to most, he looks like the steady one. The one with the plan, the map, the backup plan to the backup plan. He remembers the details no one else does. He anticipates needs before they're spoken. He keeps things running, at work, in relationships, in life. People admire his reliability. Some even envy his focus. But what they don't see is why he's so precise, why his calendar is color-coded, why he triple-checks everything, why uncertainty feels like a threat, not a possibility. What they don't see is the boy inside the man who once lived in an unpredictable world, a home where chaos erupted without warning, where love came with conditions, where his needs weren't met unless he was useful, where control wasn't a preference, it was survival. So now, as a man, he builds his safety out of structure. He wraps his emotions in logic. He replaces vulnerability with productivity. Because if he just gets everything right, maybe he won't be blindsided again. Maybe the people he loves won't leave. Maybe the ground won't disappear beneath him. But what he's really protecting isn't the plan. It's not the outcome. It's not the task. What he's protecting is his heart, the soft, raw, deeply feeling part of him that was once told it was too much or not enough. The part of him that still remembers what it felt like to be unseen, unheard, unheld. So he builds walls, but he calls them systems. He avoids intimacy, but he calls it being busy. He hides his fear behind competence. And he doesn't even realize that his constant need to get it right isn't about the project. It's about the pain. Mars in Virgo activates this perfectly. This energy wants order. clarity, excellence. But the deeper invitation is this: to ask why he needs things to be perfect in the first place. Because beneath all the control is a heart that's terrified it will be unloved if it ever drops the performance. A heart that's scared it only matters if it's helpful, organized, on point. But real love doesn't require a spreadsheet. Real safety doesn't come from perfection. And healing begins the moment he asks, what if I could still be loved even when I'm messy? What if I don't have to prove my worth to deserve peace? What if the one thing I've been protecting just needs to be seen? Because the truth is, his planning is powerful. His focus is a gift. But his softness is not a flaw. It's the part of him that's been waiting to be let out from behind the armor. And maybe, this time, he won't have to protect it alone. And how to meet him with presence, not pressure. He pulls away, and you feel it. The shift in his tone, the way his messages get shorter, how he becomes quieter, not cold, but distant. It's not rejection, but it stings like it. You wonder if you did something wrong. You ask if he's okay. He says he's fine, but you know he's not. And here's what no one tells you. The more pressure he feels to open up, the more he retreats. Not because he doesn't care, but because pressure feels like danger to someone who's been taught that vulnerability equals risk. So what can you do? You don't fix him. You don't demand access to his heart before he's ready. You don't interpret his silence as a lack of love. Instead, you meet him with presence, not pressure. You become the safe place he never had. Not by pushing, but by holding. Not by interrogating, but by witnessing. Not by rushing his healing, but by reminding him. You don't need to perform to be worthy here. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to open up on command. I'll still be here. Because deep down, he wants to be seen. He longs to be known. But he needs to feel safe enough to unarm himself. Your calm presence, your patient silence, your open heart, these are the antidotes to his fear. They speak louder than words. So when he pulls back, don't chase. Just stay. Stay grounded. Stay soft. Stay open. Let him feel that you're not going anywhere. That your love isn't conditional on how well he can explain his pain. That he can come to you in pieces and still be held with wholeness. Because when he finally does open, he won't forget how safe it felt to be met without pressure. He'll remember the stillness, the softness, the way you saw past the silence and chose to stay anyway. And that is the kind of presence that heals what pressure never could.